Welcome, everybody. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes to just kind of join in, and then we'll get started in about just a minute. Just make sure everybody gets in and gets situated. Glad to have everybody. Hope everybody's staying warm. Happy to report that Florida is a balmy 77 today, but we're all sick from, dealing with freezing temperatures and then being very warm. So well, I'm going to go ahead and get started so that we can hear from our presenter today. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Eden webinar. My name is Angie Lindsay, and I am an Extension Disaster Specialist at the University of Florida IFAS, and I currently serve as the chair for Eden. And I will serve as the moderator today, and I'm happy to be here. So if you could just take a moment to drop your name and your institution in the chat box so that we know who is with us today, that would be great, just so we have an idea who we have. And today I'm super excited because we're going to be hearing from Dr. Krystle Allen as she presents her webinar, JAGriculture, How to Add Capacity to Your Emergency Management Program. To give you a little background on Dr. Allen, she's an assistant specialist for community and economic development and a program leader for family and consumer sciences at Southern University Agricultural Research and Extension Center. She earned a PhD and 2 master's degrees and a bachelor's degree from LSU and Southern University and has spent more than a decade advancing cooperative extension programs that strengthen Louisiana's communities. In her role, she leads statewide initiatives, coordinates cross-agency collaboration, and builds strategic partnerships to promote workforce development, community resilience, and inclusive economic opportunity. Outside of her work, she's the proud mother of five. You're my hero, my friend. And a mother of five, and an active member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and exemplifying her lifelong dedication to both service and empowerment. So, welcome, Krystle. We're pleased to have you, and thank you very much for your giving of your time and sharing of your expertise with us today. Thank you so much. Before I turn, go ahead. Sorry, I'm just going to go over a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll turn it over to you, Krystle. So, if you have any questions during the presentation, Krystle has said that she likes the fireside chat, which I told her I was going to steal from her, fireside chat kind of approach. So feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat box, and she's happy to answer those during her presentation. We can also ask questions at the end of her presentation also. As you may have seen, this webinar is being recorded today, and it will be emailed out and posted to Connect Extension, our Eden subgroup, and the Eden YouTube within a day or two. Also, Reagan will include the evaluation link at the following Krystle's presentation today with an email with the recording as well. So I am going to stop talking and turn it over to Krystle. So Krystle, thank you so much, and we're excited to hear from you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Let me answer the first questions people are going to ask. JAGriculture, what is it? What does it mean? You guys, it's just a play on words. When we were coming up with a name for our emergency preparedness program at Southern University, we are the Jaguars. So I was like, Agriculture, let's put it together. So that's JAGriculture. It's not like something super deep, but that's the question we get pretty often. Like, what is JAGriculture? That's it. Just our mascot in agriculture. And again, thank you guys for having me today and for reaching out for me to facilitate this webinar and for adding capacity into our program. So today's session is titled JAGriculture, How to Add Capacity to Your Emergency Management Program. When most people think about emergency management, they picture flashing lights, first responders, and immediate crisis response. What they don't often think about is what happens before the sirens and long after the headlines fade. Disasters don't begin when a storm makes landfall, and they don't end when power is restored. They are part of a continuum, and that requires planning, education, coordination, and trust long before and after an emergency occurs. That trust is developed with Extension's model of having individuals and agents and extension professionals housed where they live. That trust is built from individuals in the community seeing you in the grocery store. That trust is built from them seeing you at the local high school basketball game or coming to your other programs. That trust is built from true relationships with your community members. And that's where extension and cooperative extension comes in. Extension has always been in the business of helping communities prepare for uncertainty, whether that's weather variability, market disruptions, public health crisis, economic shocks, the list can go on and on. We are embedded within our communities and we understand those local systems. We are trusted messengers in moments when information can mean the difference between the confusion and clarity, vulnerability, and resilience. Yet, despite this positioning, extension is often underutilized, or shall I say, misunderstood within formal emergency management structures. Our work is frequently labeled as supportive or supplemental when in reality, it is a strategic and essential to preparedness and recovery. Today's session introduces the JAGriculture model, a framework that intentionally integrates agriculture, extension, and emergency management to strengthen community resilience. JAGriculture reframes agriculture and food systems as critical infrastructure and positions extension as a connector, a translator, and more so a capacity builder across the disaster continuum. Today, we're going to explore three things. One, why emergency management naturally belongs in cooperative extension. Two, how extension's existing programming already aligns with emergency preparedness priorities. And three, we're going to identify practical ways extension professionals can engage more intentionally and emergency management partners without taking on the role of first responders. Extension is not first responders. I recently did a presentation at a conference in New Orleans. Extension as third responders. We know first responders are running into danger. We're not doing that at Extension. Second responders, they come on the scene and they help restore infrastructure and they get the power back on and they're rolling. We're not doing that, but we are third responders. The goal is not to add more to your plate as Extension professionals, but to help you see the work you're already doing through a preparedness and resilience lens, and to equip you with tools to elevate Extension's role in serving your communities before, during, and after disasters. Next slide, please. Had to put that because I work in cooperative extension. So first we're going to touch on why emergency management belongs in cooperative extension. And as Angie mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, please raise your hand, put them in the comment in the chat. I'm not really one of those whole questions to the end. It's really a conversational thing. I want you guys to leave this presentation feeling like your questions were answered. I added capacity to the work you're doing and everything was addressed. And I don't want to move on and lose a thought in the process. So why emergency management belongs in cooperative extension? Cooperative, the slide's supposed to be changing. Let me let Angie do her job. Cooperative Extension's core mission is education, preparedness, and capacity building. And these functions naturally align with emergency management. Extension operates year-round in communities, not just during crisis, positioning it to reduce risk before disasters occur. We need to go back a slide. We're still on why emergency management belongs in cooperative extension. Trusted relationships with residents, producers, and local leaders make extension a credible messenger during emergencies. I often say within the work we're doing, Southern University is such a trusted brand throughout the state of Louisiana. Everybody does not know Krystle Allen, but when I have on my Southern University pin, I have on my Southern University shirt, it allows me to lean into that trusted brand. And it really helps with our programming and with our messaging as well. Extension fills a critical gap between short-term emergency response and long-term recovery and resilience. Think about that disaster cycle, not in terms of the disaster continuum with, education, mitigation, but the disaster cycle of the disaster occurs, the communities rebuild. A lot of the time, they may not get the education and tools they need to rebuild to a higher standard. So they're returning back to their place of normal. Another disaster occurs, and then that disaster cycle just restarts, and it's a cyclical process. Well, extension is really positioned to where we can come in and add that capacity and education to break that disaster rebuild cycle and fill that critical gap with education. And disasters disproportionately impact rural, agricultural, and underserved communities. And we're already embedded within these states, within these communities and these spaces. We always have been, we are a trusted partner, as I said. And lastly, emergency preparedness strengthens rather than competes with traditional extension programming areas. Angie, I'm going to take a quick break so you can cycle through the slides and get back to, we're going to go to the disaster continuum. I know you can't go back and forth, so it can be on the right side. So just bear with me while we do that, you guys. I'll look at the chat. I know I feel like I'm double working and triple working, you guys. And I appreciate your support. Yeah.
Yeah, hold on, Krystle. I'm having
No
technical
worries.
issues here. Let's see. I can't
No,
move my cursor while these are running. So which slide you need to be on? Sorry, I apologize.
the disaster continuum.
Continuing before, during, and after. Okay, we're
Yeah,
gonna try this again. Sorry, y'all. So,
no
yeah,
worries.
I can't move my my mouse while it's playing. So I'm like, okay, all right. Sorry, folks.
So as she pulls that up, I'll just go ahead and keep going. So the disaster continuum before, during, and after a disaster. I want you guys to think of a disaster continuum as a timeline. So disasters are not one-time events. Like I just said, we have to break that disaster cycle. They are part of an ongoing cycle that requires sustained engagement. That what does that look like? That looks like education on the front end. We never know when disasters will occur. And I often say within my programming, it's much easier to engage youth participants in disaster and preparedness education, especially within Louisiana. I'm going to give you guys a quick side story. So, when hurricanes are coming and projected to make landfall in Louisiana, it turns into hurricane parties. There's a thing in Louisiana, I'm not making this up. I'm sure if you Google it, something may come up. And the premise of the hurricane party is people want to gather. They want to have a good time. They want to cook all the food in their freezer. So before we lose power, we're going to cook these steak and these hamburgers and all these good things, and we're going to party. And it's oftentimes when you're going into adult community, where in adult spaces, and you're trying to tell them about disaster and emergency preparedness, you're talking to people who may be your elder. Oh, y'all do the same thing in South Carolina. You're talking to individuals who are your elders, who have been in Louisiana much longer than you, who have lived through multiple disasters, and they're looking at you like, ma'am, I don't need help learning how to prepare for a hurricane or how to prepare for a natural disaster. I know how to do this. But when you go to kids, they are so excited, and you're like, do you guys have a meetup place? And just that continuum and that sustained engagement. If you engage with them as youth, you can really get that information in, and they are excited to bring that information home. That was a tidbit, not even in my presentation. You guys, I got a little off track. So within that continuum, before a disaster, mitigation and preparedness activities that reduce risk and strengthen readiness. That is your preparedness education. That is, we have had the beautiful partnership with LSU Ag Center's La House, and they have a home built on their campus that is able to withstand Category 5 hurricanes. And they teach individuals about the difference between paying a little bit more for a longer nail would help reinforce your garage door to so many miles per winds up to so many miles per hour. And that's the mitigation education that's really making an impact in our communities. During a disaster, we don't really go out during a disaster because we're not first and second responders. However, I know during disasters, especially with our snowstorm and a snowstorm and hurricanes, we are utilizing our Facebook page and our other social media pages to get information out, up to date information, preparedness information, telling people, plants, pets, how to take care, how to do those things during it, making sure you're not running um, a generator in your garage or too close to your window. So that coordination, that information sharing, and that trusted communication is direct during an emergency. And then after our recovery education, resource navigation, and long term community building at Southern, we are blessed to have a mobile education unit, and that allows us to travel throughout the state. And it has Wi Fi and computers on board to where if individuals need assistance with filling out applications for any type of disaster assistance or recovery assistance and different things like that. That's how we can jump in after the fact as third responders and provide that resource navigation and help them return to normal. Extension's greatest impact is often before and after disasters when education and planning matters most. And lastly, viewing disasters on a continuum helps extensions plan proactive rather than help extension to plan proactively rather than reactively. I got a little tongue tied. Is there any questions in the chat before we move on to our model? Let's see. Nope, seeing none. We can move on to the JAGriculture model. So before I get into what the model is and this framework, JAGriculture was started, you guys, with at the time it was E-Extension, now it's Extension Foundation. Our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Melian, sent us to their Propeller conference in Atlanta, and we knew we needed to have an emergency preparedness program within the university or within the Ag Center framework and cooperative extension. And we went through the framework and we tested and we've done different things and added a lot of capacity to it. Publications through Eden's grant as well. So that's where how JAGriculture formed really quickly to where we are now. I could go into a 30-minute spiel if I needed to. But JAGriculture is a framework that integrates agriculture, extension, and emergency management into a cohesive approach. I think oftentimes a lot of people have these things in silos and don't realize how they can work so beautifully in harmony together. It emphasizes preparedness, coordination, and community driven solutions rather than siloed responses. The model positions Extension as a strategic partner, not an add on in emergency planning. Agriculture is treated as is an essential infrastructure on par with housing, utilities, and transportation. JAGriculture is adaptable across hazards. We know extension, there is no cookie cutter approach to extension. While we mainly deal with, in terms of natural disasters in Louisiana, hurricanes, we have been seeing an influx in winter weather and cold weather and those kind of things. So making sure that we're adaptable across hazards and communities contexts. A great example of this is we actually had the opportunity to partner with our governor's office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, and we held different sessions throughout the state on education. This was no disaster going on. It was before hurricane season, and we went throughout the state in different areas, and we had a really dynamic presentation, and it was a community center day with different vendors around. So we had the fire marshal come out, we had the community members, and we talked about the importance of emergency preparedness and the role of cooperative extension. Can you go to the next slide, please? So, what are the core principles of the JAGriculture model? Number one, cross sector collaboration among extension, emergency management, agriculture, health, and community organizations. I often say we are better together and you go so much further, but also in times like now where resources are not so plentiful, it helps with the preventing the duplication of efforts. If we all are working on the same goal of helping communities become resilient and improving their sustainability, improving their resilience and sustainability, we can absolutely work together within these organizations across different sectors. This community-centered planning, it elevates local knowledge and priorities. Um, again, community-centered. You have to meet people where they are. While we may come in and we may say, "Oh, we know best, we know best." If they are not ready to receive the information you are giving, then your program is not community-centered. Integration of agriculture, food systems, and natural resources into the framework, into that emergency framework. This happens when you are needing to meet maybe local officials. Oftentimes, we know, especially in rural Louisiana, a lot of your traction can be made through the church. So I know in Cooperative Extension, there's a big push for elected officials and getting in with your local government. And I highly, highly, highly suggest that. But I don't want you guys to not realize the value of the church, especially in your more rural areas and the impact. A lot of people will trust their pastor or their elders in their church before they could have trust their elected officials, and it really gets you an in within that community. I know I say trust a million times, but that is a cornerstone of this program. Proactive preparedness and mitigation rather than crisis driven engagement. It's never our goal to scare individuals into conforming, like, hey, this is going to happen, blah, 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 blah. But just making sure we're proactive and we're consistent with our education and our outreach helps us to be more proactive than reactive with our engagement. Also, the scalability and flexibility to meet different communities. If you've ever been to Louisiana, or I wish I could think of an, let's think of New York. Everybody knows New York. New York as a state. New York City and Albany are both in New York, but they are so different. So you cannot take a cookie cutter approach within communities if you are delivering programming. The same goes for Louisiana. New Orleans and Opelousas are so different. However, we are charged with providing programming resources, education throughout the state. So just making sure that our program is scalable and flexible to meet the communities where they are and community centered really helps us with integration of the program, but also making sure it is having the impact that we are going for. And lastly, just making sure these approaches address all populations. I recently went through, well, maybe it wasn't recently, about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a cultural competence training in disasters, and it was put on by the 1890 group through Eden. And it really touched on things and it opened my eyes. And one of the parts of that training on cultural competency is sometimes within our programming, we tend to be drawn to communities that may reflect us. What that looks like is if you are a Christian, you may be more drawn to going into a Christian church to deliver programming. If you are a Muslim, you may be more drawn to going into that community to deliver programming. However, we have to make sure that our programming does not do that. So you have to be very intentional in your programming to make sure you're reaching all populations and vulnerable populations, even those that they may not reflect you. Next slide. I think I've seen something in the chat. Do we need to take a quick break, Angie, and address the chat? Okay. And we skipped the slide. We still have agriculture's role in emergency preparedness. Um, the person needs to prepare. That's amazing, Keegan. Meeting them where they are, and getting that really practical hands-on. Sometimes people don't just want to come and get an education, and that also helps with impacts because you can say, "Hey, we worked on this, 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 this." Um, Chase, if you're asking, I am based in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Southern University, Baton Rouge. We're on the landmass, and my primary area of geographic impact. I'm really not sure what you are asking with that question. Okay, so going back, let's not move forward. So agriculture's role in emergency preparedness. Agriculture underpins food security, employment, and local economies. Another cornerstone of our program, which I probably should have added in the last slide. I regularly update our model And our focus area is to make sure that I am aligned with USDA NIFA's priorities and focus areas. Why do I do this? Because when funding, oh, you was asking Keegan. Sorry, Chase. So when funding becomes available, I want to make sure that what I am putting out, what I'm applying for, what I'm going after, I'm already aligned with the work that they've already deemed a priority. And of course, they have access to so much more data than I do, and so much more um, evaluations and impact things. So if by they I mean USDA and if they are going and they feel like food security is a huge thing, local economies, blah blah blah, I'm gonna try to stay make sure I'm as aligned with that as possible. Farms, processors, and food distribution systems are highly vulnerable to disasters. Agricultural disruptions have cascading effects that could be felt in household, communities, and markets. Producers often lack access to timely, understandable emergency information, and extension is that bridges the gap between agricultural stakeholders and emergency management systems. As we go through the slides, I will touch on extension as a connector and translator. And prepared agricultural systems accelerate community recovery. So that's agriculture's role in emergency preparedness. So let's see what you say, Justin. How have you addressed language barriers apart from, say, translation? Have you found ways of connecting with local cultural or knowledge brokers to help bridge language barriers as well as building trust? So personally within us, we try to make sure we are compliant with the civil rights of USDA. You know, we all go through the reviews at our institutions. Oh no, I got the message. It's fine. So at my level, we do make sure that we have that translation service. But outside of that, I have never run into a space or a place where language was a barrier. I don't want to sit here and make something up to sound great. Um, but so that's my answer. So as far as we've gone, we make sure that our printed material is able to be accessed in different languages, and there is a call service, but that's just something we do at the university level to make sure we are civil rights compliant, and also we make sure that everyone has access. I hope that touched on your question. All right. So building cross-sector partnerships. Effective emergency preparedness requires collaboration across sectors and disciplines. I'm going to say that again because I got a little tongue-tied the first time, and it's so important. Effective emergency preparedness requires collaboration across sectors and disciplines. You cannot do it alone. I know it's so many times as extension professionals, we wear a million hats and we want to be everything for everyone, but we are not the decision makers in the community, but we need to make sure we are aligned with the decision makers in the community. We do not have all the resources, but we need to have access to those same resources. And how do you get that? You get that through partnerships, you get that through relationships. And how do you build relationships? Trust. Extension serves as a natural and a neutral convener capable of building and bridging diverse partners together. We are the glue. So, a great example of this is if you are partnering with a local nonprofit that wants to do work in the community to help um, aging populations weatherize their home, right? So that nonprofit could go in the community and say, "Hey, I'm such and such from nonprofit, and I just want to do work with your home and help you weatherize your home." What are they going to be met with? They're going to be met with skepticism. You want to come do what? Who are you? Why would I let you in my home? But as an extension professional who has these already established relationships, who've already built the trust, you are that natural and neutral convener to where that you can partner with that nonprofit and say, hey, this is my partner and this is the work we are doing together to add capacity to your work. But guess what? They already know you're invested in them. You're invested in the community because you are the community. They see you. They see you at the grocery store. They see you over here doing work. They seen your other programs when you went into the school and taught the kids about food safety and how to eat healthy. Those kind of things and those natural relationships help you become that neutral convener of bridging that and bringing diverse partners together. Key partners in disaster work include emergency managers. You want to engage public health, schools, like I mentioned, the youth is a great start, nonprofits, faith based groups, like I said, especially in rural Louisiana and your communities. Sometimes the church is the cornerstone of the community, and also utilities. Partnerships should be built before the disaster occurs, not during response. You cannot build relationships when everybody's on 10, everybody has a job to do, everybody's trying to restore the community back to normal, in addition to their own personal homes. That's not the time. The time is now, right now, when we're not in hurricane season, or I know a lot of people around the country are still dealing with the winter weather. We are like you, Angie, in Florida. I think it's maybe 70 degrees outside. I have on a sleeveless dress now. So the time is when you're being proactive before the emergency occurs, before the disaster strikes. And a great way to build that relationship is you can't always be the asker. Sometimes you have to answer the call. All the times you have to answer the call. I can't always say, "Hey, I'm having a program. Can you join me? And can you do this? Can you add capacity to the work I'm doing?" And then when they pick up the phone and they say, "Hey, Dr. Allen, I'm doing this. Can you add capacity?" And I'm like, "No, that's not my priority. I can't do it." No, that's not how you build effective and relational relationships. Memorandums of understanding, so MOUs, joint trainings, and shared planning tools also strengthen collaboration. We at Southern University Ag Center, we are about 15 minutes from the LSU Ag Center, and there was such a push for us to do so much work together. We're two different systems. I know a lot of states have joint cooperative extension and ag departments. We are two different systems, but we have a memorandum of understanding to work collaboratively, to work collectively. And that just helps, of course, with duplication of efforts, but also it helps push us so much further because we can share resources and share knowledge. And also just recognizing within cross sector partnerships that trust and relationships are as critical as formal structures. Trust and relationships. I know you guys are like, this is a lesson on trust. Yes, it is. Let's see the chat before we move forward. We can move forward to the next slide. Okay, so how do we align extension programming with emergency management priorities? Many extension programs already support preparedness without being labeled as such. Nutrition, financial literacy, youth development, and digital access all contribute to resilience. So that's when I said that we're going to talk about the work you're already doing that kind of probably fits loosely into a model of preparedness and emergency management, but you just haven't labeled it or titled it as such. So reframing those programming through an emergency preparedness lens increases the relevance and funding alignment. You want to make sure you're aligned with funding sources, whether that's either, I know they have their annual grant, which I have been a recipient of, and it helps so much, whether that's USDA NIFA, capacity building, or different initiatives. If you reframe the program you're doing, so say you have a nutrition program that's already looking at food security, you can look at that through that emergency preparedness lens to see how you could be better aligned with those funding opportunities, but also making sure it's relevant. And you want to make sure you're aligning your plan of work with your local and state emergency management goals. You can typically Google and find that information, but building that relationship, calling, I promise if you call, well, I can't promise that. I can say for us, it's not hard to reach out and build that relationship because once you reach out, you introduce yourself, tell them the work you're doing, and tell them how you can add capacity to what they're doing, or they can add capacity to what you're doing. Typically, people are excited to partner in this space because there is so much work to do and many hands make the work light. But also make sure you're using hazard mitigation plans and your emergency priorities to guide your programming decisions. I can't say this enough. Utilizing those advisory committees, those advisory boards, community information. I know we have listening sessions to get that information. You want to make sure you're utilizing that when you are developing and designing your programming, just to make sure that's the guide and it's in alignment. Next slide, please. Let's see. I seen the chat go off while she's pulling it up. We're having a heat wave in Minnesota. It's 34 degrees. It'll be up to 50 soon. I'm going to tell you really quickly because it's right in front of me. It is currently 75 in Louisiana. Our high today will be 76. So I guess we are feeling like it's spring and I'm excited. So, what are these practical tools and approaches for extension professionals? As I just left off on the previous side, that community needs assessment and those listening sessions, those advisory committees are paramount, but making sure that the information is focused on risk and preparedness. The conversation, as you know, in these rooms can go a million different ways. So making sure you guide that conversation, but utilizing those needs assessments, your advisory committees, and those listening sessions is paramount to designing and developing your programming, and also identifying those partners and those partnerships that you can develop as well. You want to make sure you're incorporating emergency preparedness into your annual work plans, those plan of works. We know that hurricane season is every year from June 1st to November 30th. I know that. I know I'm going to work with youth groups. I know we have summer camps within our department and that I'm going to work with. And these things are all reflected in my annual plan of work. I can say I do leave a little, I guess, shaky room because I'm still designing and I'm still elevating our programming and thinking of different ways to add capacity. So what I don't catch this year that I may still do, I make sure that I include it in the next year's plan of work. Um, Partner mapping. Partner mapping is paramount to identifying gaps and overlaps in services. As I mentioned before, duplication of effort is a poor use of resources, overlapping services. If you know that or another agency or organization is engaged in the work you're doing, or they may have an expertise that you don't have, reach out. 9 times out of 10, assuming that they're not so busy, they will be excited to partner, and you can absolutely identify these sources and of information through partner mapping. And I know it seems like an extra thing to do because we already have so much to do, but it's paramount in making sure you keep up with the work that they're doing, not trying to commit it to memory, who that partner is, where they're located, and the capacity that they can add, the resources they have. It could just really help add so much capacity to the work you're doing and really strengthen your program. Making sure you train your extension staff on emergency management basics and terminology. Really quickly, because I don't really want to run out of time too soon. We are preparing to send 5 agents to the Spring Eden Conference, and these are individuals who have been working at the Ag Center some upwards of 10, 15 years, but they were working in nutrition. And as they transition to becoming outreach agents and they're going to engage in emergency preparedness work before they go into communities, we want to make sure they're trained. We want to make sure they know the basics and they know the terminology and they are creating those relationships, because a lot of the work and capacity, I feel like I said capacity as much as training. I mean, as much as trust. A lot of the capacity that we have in our program and that we've added to our program has been added through relationships with other extension professionals throughout the country. And conferences and going to training is a great opportunity to do that within your programming as well. And lastly, you want to make sure you're leveraging data and evaluations to demonstrate your impact. Nothing drives funding or positions you to receive funding better than being able to display your impact, but also it allows you to see where you're going and to really measure the impact that you've had. It allows you to look at that knowledge gap that was lessened, or the um, gap in people actually engaging in the preparedness work. We could go out and educate, but when we're looking at impacts, how many people implemented the things that we taught? Make sure you're leveraging that data and evaluations. Strengthening community resilience through extension. We're going to go to the next slide. We're almost done, you guys. I hope I'm doing a great job. So resilience is built. Oh, let's look at the chat. 1 second. Oh, we're giving our temps. I mean, nothing looks like it's beating Louisiana. Yes, yes, yes. Please, 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 if you can, make sure you go to the Eden Spring Training Conference. So, resilience is built through knowledge, relationships, and adaptive capacity. Extension education empowers individuals and communities to make informed decisions. Social capital, which is your trust in your networks, is a critical form of infrastructure. Social capital is just a fancy, more academic way to say trust and network. So when you go and you have that coffee at the coffee shop and you're talking to such and such and you're introducing yourself and you guys start to network, and then you may see them again, and the next thing you know, you tell them what you do and you're going to do programs and different things. That's you increasing your social capital, and it is a critical form of infrastructure, and it adds so much resilience through extension within the community. Extension programs can reduce disparities in preparedness and recovery outcomes. The more educated and the more inclined communities are to utilizing the information and the education that you've provided, it really helps reduce that impact and improve their recovery outcomes. And lastly, long term engagement leads to stronger, more self sustaining communities. Long term engagement. That means you cannot just do a program once a year. They see you once a year, you tell them something. Well, that wouldn't even be a program, because if it's once a year, that's just you going out doing an event. But when you have a true program and you're really engaging these communities and you're really boots on the ground, and it may not all just be emergency preparedness. You may have a series of programming that you're engaging different communities with long term over a period of time. That helps build more stronger and more sustaining communities, because at this point, okay, at some point they're like, I didn't heard this 10 times. She's going to let me just try. Hopefully that's the end goal of it. But just making sure that we're measuring our impacts and we're looking at the implementation of what we're teaching through our education efforts really helps those communities. Extension as a connector and translator. And then we're going to round it out with a call to action. The next slide, please. So when I say extension as a connection, we know cooperative extension as in its most basic function, we are supposed to be taking research and adapting it to programs in communities, right? So that's the connection between the research communities need and the connection to the community. However, extension also translates technical emergency information into practical, usable guidance. So when we get information from different sources, it is our responsibility to translate it to usable information that communities can receive, that communities can understand, and that communities can use. It connects residents and communities and producers to resources, agencies, and recovery programs. Hold on, let's see what you said. But aside from that, have you found that engaging with local community social media is an effective way to make community members aware of resources? Yes, 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 yes. Other than social media, the days of posting bulletin boards, which we do have some communities throughout the state who get their information through bulletin boards and different things. Social media is our easiest way to reach our audiences, and we always tell people, make sure you're following our Facebook, make sure you're doing such and such, because it does. Of course, we have our listservs, but more people are sitting there just randomly scrolling social media than they are randomly scrolling their email. So it does allow us to get that information. out faster. Okay. So, Cooperative Extension connects residents and producers to resources, agencies, and recovery programs. We are that wealth of information through our resource map. Now that we have a resource map, if someone comes and they say, "Hey, I really need this service," you know who does what and where they do it and how they offer it. And you can make that connection. You can build that gap between a need and somebody who provides a service to fulfill that need. And that's a role for Cooperative Extension in emergency management, emergency planning. Extension helps emergency managers understand community realities and needs. We are within the community, we are embedded within the community. We're talking, we're doing these needs assessments, we're doing these listening sessions. So when they need this information, it just seems naturally ideal that they will reach out to Cooperative Extension agents, boots on the ground, who can be that connection, who can really provide the information and making sure that the community's voices are heard. Oftentimes, if people are not engaged within their community and they're making decisions, they're making it from their frame of reference, they're making it from their mindset, and it may not be what the community needs at that moment. Acting as a connector reduces duplication and improves coordination. I know you guys are going to leave here and y'all going to say, this lady said trust a lot. She said capacity a lot. And she said duplication of efforts. Those are three pillars that I will stand on a million times when we're thinking about funding and we're thinking about adding capacity to these communities and we're thinking about limited resources. Eliminating duplication of efforts can take you so much further and allow you to use those resources for another program. And lastly, this role as a connector or translator really enforces Extension's value within the emergency management systems. So I'm going to end today on the last slide, which is a call to action. I believe in a call to action. So, as we are all on this call as extension professionals, I want everybody to identify. We're not going to share, it's just a thought for you to get to. I want you to leave here with something to think about because I really hope you guys use the information I provided today. I want you to identify one way that your current programming supports emergency preparedness if it's not already defined as an emergency preparedness program. So, if you are a nutrition person, working in food security, if you are someone in economic development working in small businesses, how can you identify one way that that current programming supports emergency preparedness or can support emergency preparedness within the next month or two? I want you to think about how you can strengthen or establish just one cross-sector partnership. Do the groundwork. Identify who's doing some of the work that you're doing, who's working in an area that you want to get into, who's providing, who's that mover and shaker in the community who may know. And I want you to, or think about a relationship that you had that may have just kind of faltered over time. How can you re-strengthen that? I want you to integrate preparedness language into your plan of work and report. Is another great example, like I mentioned, small business. If you're doing small business work, you may put in your plan of work, will engage 10 small businesses on business preparedness and really add that language to your plan of work. That's how we strengthen Extension's role in emergency preparedness and emergency management, but we also bring awareness. I want you to advocate for Extension's role in your local and state emergency planning. I know some places are further along. I'm familiar with Michigan's E-Rail program, in which they've partnered with their state to do different emergency management or emergency response for livestock. So that was done through advocating for the necessity. If an accident happens with livestock, what happened? Who do they call? That's advocacy. So make sure you're advocating for Extension's role in emergency planning within your local municipality or your state. And lastly, I want us all, myself included, to commit to ongoing learning and collaboration to make sure we're advancing the work that we are doing, but we're also promoting community resilience. So with that being said, we have 8 minutes for question and answer. I enjoyed today. I hope you guys enjoyed today. I know they have a a survey to take at the end. I just got really dark in my room. I don't know, but
Thank
I'm
you
going to
so
turn it
much.
back over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Krystle. Sorry. I apologize. I could not access my audio or my video while I was sharing your screens or sharing your slides. So I apologize for that. So, yes, I think Reagan did absolutely share that evaluation piece in there. So please take a minute and fill that out for us. They'll also come in an email as well afterwards with the recording also. But before we wrap up, are there any additional questions for Krystle? Okay, I
You know,
don't
when
see
no one
any.
asks questions,
Go
I feel
ahead.
like it's such a phenomenal job that you guys have no questions left.
Exactly right. That's precisely right. And it was great that there were some questions asked during the chat, and I
Mhm.
appreciate you going to look, Krystle, because I couldn't even access the chat. So thank you for that, and sorry for the technological difficulties. So, was there a hand raised? Sorry, did I see one? Please. Oh,
Yeah.
please, yes, go ahead.
No, thank you very much for your presentation. Sorry about the weather jokes, but I do want to go back to your comment on language
Mhm.
and how do you know that you are not having problems accessing communities whose primary language is not English?
How do I know? So personally, my presentation style, I'm super, super, super engaging. So today, when I said I'm asking questions, I'm fielding questions during the presentation. If you go to a hands-on program of mine, there is no person that could hide in the back of the room. So I'm meeting everyone, I'm talking to everyone, and in my work, I've never experienced that barrier. So now your question is making me rethink, have I, and it was a mask and they did not receive it? Or how would they communicate to me that there is a language barrier? Because we do provide translation services, we do provide translated printed materials, but someone would have to ask for that information to receive that. And then also with the changes to our sign-in sheets from USDA NIFA, we don't even collect that different demographic data. So I would not know if anybody in the room is of another ethnicity to need the information. So before, we used to have those identifiers. We no longer have them.
Or even who's coming to the room, how do they know
Right.
to come and participate? And I'm not challenging you. It's more of
I
a
don't feel
project that I'm beginning to work on to reach limited English populations.
Mhm.
What can we do to improve that
What have you found?
efforts?
What have you
I'm
found?
sorry.
What have you
I'm
found?
just beginning.
Oh, okay.
I'm just beginning.
Please
But
share that. Yes.
I'm happy. I will be sharing my results in the next few months, and I've been communicating a lot with Red Cross about this issue. How do
Mhm.
we communicate? How do we follow? We're having a big problem following post-disaster to
Mhm.
do post-disaster evaluations with Red Cross. So it's with different populations. You contact once, you have no idea how to contact them again because they
Mhm.
move or there's no good mechanism to keep track of their post-disaster experience. So we're trying to step back and think of how do we engage with those communities and
Mhm.
maintain that engagement.
That sounds like it'll be a great webinar. Not to take your thunder, Reagan and Angie. Once this information is found.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah, that'd be wonderful to share that information. I think a lot of folks would be interested. I think like we have time for one more, and then there's one more in the chat. So Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to address the language barrier thing. So um, I work with a tornado project, and part of that is getting watches and warnings out. So the Weather Service have started to move towards getting watches and warnings in, say, Spanish. But on the coast, there are Vietnamese and Cambodian residents who are first, second generation and don't necessarily speak English to the level that might be required of those graphics that are going out there. And so the information's confusing. So I know that in New Orleans and Baton Rouge weather forecasting offices, they've worked with us in my program with Mississippi, Alabama, Sea Grant and Vortex to produce weather information in those languages. And so that takes that into those communities. And one of the things that we've done there is work with Boat People SOS, who are a Vietnamese kind of a charity group. And so again, that helps because they've got the trust. It helps because they know how to get that information into the communities. And then finally, the other thing that I just wanted to say is that the other way that I kind of do things is I create comic strips to create like information about weather, tornado watches, warnings, when you should be leaving places. And one of the things that you can do in those comic strips is you can have everything in, say, English, but then if you introduce or have Spanish characters in there, which I did on purpose, they can then call auntie, and auntie maybe doesn't speak English so well. And so you can switch the language into Spanish and have the little yellow text boxes along the bottom, which is the English translation. That way everyone is included. People are actually learning a different language at the same time, and we're able to communicate that through like risk through that. I'm so sorry if that was a bit of a mouthful, but I thought it was important.
No,
Okay,
thank you, Justin.
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, Krystle, please.
So I'm going to share my screen right quick. Can you guys see my screen? Yeah. So Chase, in the chat, I see you asked about the translation and interpretation services on our Ag Center website. I can't give you what languages. I know anytime. So I know it's like your traditional Spanish, French, Vietnamese. I want to say they do it for every language. We've never ran into a barrier where someone had a language where we didn't have that translation service or interpretation service available to them. So we of course have our civil rights statement, but when individuals need translation or interpretation services, there is a contract. Again, this is above my pay grade. I'm not involved in the contract. I just benefit from the service. And if we need something translated or we need interpretation services, we can reach out to our university or our Ag Center, and we have that as a service. Again, I've never encountered someone say, oh, we don't provide services for that language. So it may be every language. I don't know. I know everyone we've ever encountered, it's something that's available to us. So maybe you could get with your leadership at your university to see if that's a contract that they are interested in identifying and providing for you guys to add capacity to the work you're doing. I think that was it.
Great. Thank you, Krystle. This was a great conversation. Thanks for sharing a lot of the information and some resources that you've used and some great questions in the chat as well. So I do want to mention that our next webinar, Eden webinar, will be March 10th at 1 p.m. And that particular focus is going to be laboring safety in the heat, considerations for yourself, your staff, and those you educate. This is by Douglas Casa, who's with the Corey Stringer Institute out of University of Connecticut. I have seen him speak. He does a fantastic job. So I would highly recommend folks trying to make that one. It's for those of us, especially like Krystle and I, who are wearing our shorts today in 77 degrees temperature, learning about heat and the impact that has not only on our agricultural communities, but our agricultural workers as well. Is highly interesting information. So want to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, that evaluation is in the chat box, but it'll be sent to you later. And thanks for joining us and sticking around for a great conversation. And Krystle, thank you so much for sharing today. We really appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.